seats for Mr. Brosdale's presentation. Do you have anything else other than the
Just
say a word? Okay.
ready.
Go ahead.
All right, let's go down, please.
I meant to let you know, but I did test it.
Before Dr. Timo makes the presentation on the grades 3 through 8 assessments, Regents, and AP exams, which is the formal part of my address, every November around this time, prior to Thanksgiving, I reflect upon what I'm thankful for. And this has been a unique year, and there's a lot to be thankful for. I'm glad I'm still here 6 years in, and for the board's support, especially in this challenging year with this past summer and what we experienced technology-wise, and I thank them for giving me the opportunity to finish my career in this great district. I'd like to thank Dee and the administrators for being here tonight, Dee for creating the presentation, the support from the administrators, and I want to tell you this summer, put a lot of pressure on all these folks over here. I think they deserve a special thanks because we had to get a lot together, keep the district together, and get ready for an opening for school in the blink of an eye. So thank you, especially Pete and Elizabeth, for taking on the challenge of your positions. So I applaud you, and thank you. Ken, thanks for still standing and hanging in there for the last 7 or 8 weeks. It was sometimes 11-hour days, no weekends, and no vacation days, and we're about 100% by Friday. So thank you for all of that. And Ken will be accompanying me to a superintendent's workshop in Riverhead. We were invited by the Superintendent's Association to talk about the effects and the impact of what happened to us. Sag Harbor was just hit recently, and they're recovering as well. So thank you all. And I am also grateful for our teachers and our students and the wonderful scores we're about to share with you and what they've achieved. I think they're among the strongest, if not the strongest, Regents grades I've seen since I've been here. And the AP, we grow every year, better than the New York State and global average. Is that right, Matt? And all of our AP scores. And Dee has some numbers for you about AP scholars and the rest, and we keep growing there as well. So it's a lot to celebrate. We're thankful, and we celebrate for where we are and where we stand as a district compared to other districts, even on the island. So Dee, with that being said, would you please come on up?
The thing that I always say about when we do the data presentation is this is just one snapshot in time that you look at, and it's much more than just the assessment. I think it's also what we provide students in terms of social emotional learning, extracurricular activities, athletics. I could go on and on. So while I'm presenting the data that have to do with just a snapshot in time, there's so much more that goes on during the year that doesn't get added into this presentation. It's also a positive effect for our students. So I just wanted to say that beforehand. Data year to year also changes. Got it? I saw the minute. Data is kind of fluid. It's fluid from year to year, and it's based on a lot of different things. Assessments change over the years, and we're going to talk about some of the changes that happened this year, some of the changes that are about to happen. We talked a lot about changes in data a number of years ago when we changed to the Common Core assessment. We talked about refusal rates. We're going to see all of that again tonight. But again, data is fluid from year to year, and we really need to look at, when we see ups and downs in the data, we need to really analyze that and figure it out And the guys will tell you I'm pretty hard about that. When I see something that, we slip a little bit, I'm questioning what's going on and taking a closer look. So we're going to talk about accountability. New York State Education Department issues accountability for every school district. This comes out in about June or July of every school year. It's based on, fortunately, not on last year's data, although it came out in June of 2019. It's based on 17-18 data. But this has a lot to do with those reports that end up in Newsday as to whether you're in good standing or your school is in improvement. We have always, all three of our buildings, been in good standing. The high school, about 6 or 7 years ago, State Ed began to say, well, it's okay to be in good standing, but maybe high schools can be reward schools. So they coined a term, reward school. The high school has been a reward school for every year that State Ed has looked at that. This past year, they changed the accountability for high schools. They don't just look at the region scores. Accountability used to be based only on test assessments. Now it's based on a lot of different factors. It's test assessments, it's graduation rate for the high school, it's how many students of ours take AP exams, it's also based on attendance for all three buildings. So it's based on a lot more than just the assessments that they used to base it on. Okay, we'll start with the New York State 3 through 8 ELA math and 4 and 8 science. And again, there's going to be a couple of changes that I'll talk about as we go through this. But for 3 through 8, the standards have remained the same. A level 4 means that the student excels, a level 3 means that they're proficient, a 2 means that they're below, and a 1 means that they are well below. So we always look at the percentage of 3s and 4s that we have in each grade level. But before we can get to that, we also have to take a look at our rate of test participation. It used to be that any school that dipped below the 95% participation rate was found in need of improvement. State Ed has since changed that since there's been a large movement toward refusal. So in terms of our last 4 years, in terms of these are the numbers tested, not the refusals, we hover around 40%. And if you'll notice where it says 8th grade math, that rate is different because many of our 8th graders take the Algebra 1. And when New York State calculates our accountability for tested, in 8th grade it's going to dip well below because we give many of our students the Algebra 1 exam. When I added in the number that took the Algebra 1 exam and the number that took the Math 8 exam, that participation rate or the tested rate goes up to 43%. So it's very similar to the other numbers. ELA assessment data. This is going to get a little technical because I did a little more than what's on the slide. We can look at ourselves going from 3rd grade to 3rd grade, 4th grade to 4th grade every year. But that is not so meaningful because our numbers tested change, our types of students that take the assessment change. So I began to look at the numbers along with the directors and the principals, going and seeing in grade 3, what was the percentage passing, which was 58%. In grade 4, it went to a 61%, so that seemed good. Then I saw that we went from 4th grade, 70% being proficient, to 42% in 5th grade being proficient. I'm like, what is going on? So I went a little deeper into the data, and I actually looked at every student individually one by one. When you look at what went on in 4th grade, we had a certain number of students as a group that took the test. The following year, we lost about 12% of those students. So our number taking the test decreased. When I looked at the number of students or the actual students that took the test in 4th grade, I looked and compared them. Did they take the test in 4th grade? And if they took it in 4th grade, were they proficient or not proficient? And what I found was pretty interesting. Out of the students that took the test in 5th grade, less than 3/4 of them, so less than 75%, had taken the test in 4th grade. The additional students that were taking the test in 5th grade that actually, kept our numbers kind of increased were brand new to test taking. They had never taken one of the assessments before, and there was nothing for me to compare them to. When I look at the students that took it consistently from 4th grade to 5th grade, there was an increase in their scores. Some only went from a 3 to a 4, so it didn't change our percentage in terms of numbers of students that were proficient, but at least it showed student growth. Even though as a group, as a cohort, it didn't show growth. So then, to look at the point again, if you look from grade 5 to 6, we went from 44 to 63. So you think, oh, okay, that's great. But I did the same kind of analysis just to kind of see, was that a homogeneous group? Was the cohort the same in grade 6 as it was in grade 5? And what I found was, those students, the performance increased dramatically. But when you look in grade 6, 96% of those students that took the test had taken the test the year before. So that's a good indication to me that the same students were taking the test, almost 100% of the same students, and they went from a 44% proficient to a 64. So that also demonstrates student growth. Everybody understanding that? Okay.
Did you find the 17th, 5th grade the same situation as the 18th? No, like the 44%?
But there's a pattern, 58, 61, 70, 42, it's up, down, up, down, up, down.
Right, there is a pattern, and it goes according to the percentage of students. It does correlate. It's correlational, it's not causational, but it correlates with how many students were the same group of cohort that took the test. So if the percentage, say if we had 70% of the students taking the test the second year, and I'm comparing that to the year before, that's a different group of students. That's not the same group. If you've got a 96% cohort agreement,
It's a new class, it's a new grade.
not a new grade, we have new students that begin taking the test, that had never taken it before, so I can't compare their scores.
Okay.
The group is different than the first group that took it. So the students that took it in 5th grade are very different from the students that took it in 4th grade.
And that pattern goes 58 to 61, so that goes up. 70 to 42, it goes down. 44 to 63, it goes up. 66 to 51, it goes down. 37 to 66, it goes up.
And going from 3rd to 4th grade, where you have a moderate increase, just 3 percentage points, you've got about 82% of the same students that took it. From 4th to 5th grade, you only had about 70% of the same students. 5th to 6th, you had 96%. So you got that big bump of 19 points. Likewise, 7th to 8th, where we increased by 29 percentage points, our proficiency rating, that was 89%. So you're close to the same type of student or the same group of students taking the exam. When you introduce, we may have had approximately the same number, like there might have been 70 students in one grade level that took it, 62 in the next. You've already lost 8 of those students that took it. Now of those 62, if only 40 of them were the same students, that's a very different group because you now have introduced 22 students that never took the test before. So you can't really say your students didn't grow or they lost. I looked at students individually then and I can tell who went up and who went down from one grade level to the next. I did do that analysis. Okay, likewise with math, you're going to see the same types of things. And he did, once again, that big jump in 8th grade, we only had about 26 students take the math 8. So out of the 26, they did very well, but it was still only 26 students out of that whole group. But if you look at the pattern, 53 to 43, now we saw a 3rd to 4th grade increase last time. When you look at this, we have different students who decide to take the math test and different students who decide to opt out of the math test. If you look at that, going from 3rd to 4th grade, we lost 10 students from one grade from 3rd to 4th, and only 75% of those students were the same. And that could account for the 10% decrease.
So it's clear, so going from 4th to 5th, based on 60 to 59%, we can say that the students were the same.
85% were the same students. Yeah. It's directly proportional. I was surprised actually when I started looking at that because I was concerned about those scores and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, we need to do something more for AIS. But no, it's directly proportional to the number of students that are the same cohort. want to make sure everybody understood this. Yes, and some of them that went from a 3 to a 4, unfortunately, that doesn't increase our proficiency rate. There were some that went from a 3 to a 2, and those are the students that we need to look at with multiple measures, and we'll use Ames Web. For the ELA, we'll use Ames Web. For the math, we'll use teacher-constructed tests to look and see if they need something. I also looked at those students' grades. I looked at Fontes and Pinnell benchmarking for them. So you look at multiple factors. And it used to be the state would say when the scores came out, if a student was in a level 1 or a level 2, they mandated AIS services, either in ELA or math. Now they don't mandate it, but we are mandated to look at those students with multiple measures and determine who requires. Because some of the students that take the test do rush through it. We have one student go from a 4 to a 1. And I'm going, what is going on? But then I looked at the grades. The student's a 95, 99 student. Low risk on the Ames Web. And what happened was that student probably rushed through the assessment and just didn't take their time. Science 2019, grade 4 and 8, those results are still embargoed. Every year when I do this presentation, I say the same thing. But I can report our 2018 scores. So in 2018, both grade 4 and grade 8 were at 97%. If you compare it, in 2017, we had 97% proficiency in grade 4 and 94% in grade 8. So there was a slight increase with our grade 8. Again, it could be different cohort students, although I will say for our science assessments, most of our students take it. That's not a test that they refuse upon. There's some changes coming up to the math, which I'm going to talk about, the science, I'm sorry, which I'm going to talk about now. This is the last spring, so 2020 will be the last spring that we administer the grade 4 science and the grade 8 science. They'll both be administered. In 2021, I can't believe I'm talking about this, in 2021 in the spring, we will be doing 8th grade only. New York State Ed will only be releasing a grade 8 assessment. And in 2022, they're going to administer the new grade 5 science assessment and grade 8. There will no longer be a grade 4 science assessment. And if they tested those students in 5th grade in 2021, they would be double testing those students, so they gave them more moratorium at that point. Regents results. The thing that we need to remember about Regents scores, it is not a percentage of the test that the student gets correct. It is a standard score. If you look at that, when we get the levels for the 3 through 8 assessments, we get the levels, but we also get a numeric score. It's usually anywhere from a 500 to about a 750. Those are standard scores, and then they prorate those standard scores to get the different levels. For Regents results, the standard scores are based on 0 to 100. So it's not a 65% on the test, it is a 65 standard score for passing. It's an 85 for mastery. And the students with disabilities, LEP students or ELL students, they have the option of a safety net of a 55 to a 64. I know this is a busy slide, and it's difficult to read it. Let me just summarize that going from year to year, again, we always need to think different cohorts of students, different numbers of students. Sometimes we might have over 200 students taking an assessment, and sometimes only 90, 94, I think was physics. So if we take a look at this, 4 of our assessments remained equal, 2 went up, and 1 went down by a couple of percentage points. So we did well in the math assessments. Algebra 2, we're still at 100%. No one around here gets 100%. They might come close, but 100% is unbelievable. Now I'm shooting for 100% mastery on my test. I don't know, maybe you might get those. It'd be nice if we could increase the scores a little bit. These are the humanities regions. U.S. history staying at 99%. We're trying for 100. Maybe we'll get it this year. World was down a little bit, but I need to call attention to the fact that this was the transition exam, and it was the first year our teachers are teaching to what's called the new framework in social studies. So there's a change in the exam, and there's a change in how our teachers are teaching the assessments. And ELA stayed about the same from one to another, but I will point out that there was a 12% increase in mastery on ELA. So the students seem to be writing tests. Okay, advanced placement results. While these are not technically something that New York State Education does, or that I mean, we administer them here, but it's through the college boards, it's not something that State Ed ever asked us to report in terms of data. They did last year. It was the first year we had to report AP numbers, not how our students did, but the numbers of students taking AP exams. So they are taking account of that for our accountability standards. If anybody has questions as to how the numbers compare in terms of numbers of students that took it in 2018, I can give you those. But basically, our numbers are pretty similar, except in, it's on the number slide. Kept coming on to it. Yeah, 6 kids did overall. Right, for the number of, it's called the number of exams that we wrote, and there were about 16 that, I think it went up, right?
In 2018, we had 251 students that wrote 522 exams. In 19, we had 245, so we went down by 6 kids. But we went up
More
to
exams.
8 exams.
So, yeah, well, a lot of our kids are challenging themselves on multiple exams, which is a good thing. What that means, though, I mean, it's good because it'll help our accountability with State X. They're really only looking for the numbers of students that are taking the test. But those students also need to do well. So we have kids challenging themselves. So our number of proficiency may decrease a little bit as that increases. I think one example of that is if you look, okay, it's one of the art ones. I think one year we had 7 students take it and 707 pass, so we had 100%. But this year we had 17 students take it, 16 out of 17 passed, so it was like at a 94%. And it looks like we went down, but actually we had a lot more students that were challenging themselves, so it was a good thing. Are there any questions in terms of the numbers for science and math? This is the slide I was talking about with studio art drawing. The number went down, but it really, we have 16 students that passed out of 17, so I think that's a really good thing. The year before with 100 was 7 out of 7. Class of 2019, we had a graduation rate of 98. We had, I believe, 2 students that are staying until age 21. If you're a student with a disability, you are entitled to educational services until you've received either a commencement credential or a local diploma. So a couple of kids stayed with us, and a couple of students, I believe we had 2 12th graders that did drop out last year. Oops. Types of diplomas, I want to point out 2. We went from 40, I think it was 49% that received Regents with Advanced Designation last year to a 60%. So while we had a decrease in the number of students that received a local diploma, it was actually a good thing because we increased the types of diplomas that our students are getting. Post-secondary plans, 98.5% of the students were accepted into a 2- or 4-year college post-graduation. 75% plan to attend a 4-year college, 23.5% a 2-year college, 1% I believe was going into employment, and the 0.5 is one student who was going into adult services following graduation.
How many students is that based on? How many graduating?
206.
That number is the same number for the year.
All of those numbers actually are exactly the same as the year before.
G, are more kids going, are we seeing two-year college growth, or that's staying consistent?
It's consistent with last year, but if I go back 3 or 4 years, it was a little different, where we had fewer students going to two-year college, more going to a 4-year college. I think it's affordability. I think a lot of our students, because of course, will start out at a 2-year college and then transfer to a 4-year. There's a great deal between Suffolk Community College and Stony Brook right now, that if you go there for a year or two and get some credits in, then you can transfer. And it saves the family some money to do that.
I just wanted to add something to the AP results. One of the numbers that we do look at are the overall number of students taking exams that are scoring a 3 or better. Last year, our percent of students scoring a 3 or better was almost 82%. For the last 5 years, it's been 71, just about 71%, all the way up to 82%. That is phenomenal. When I talk to directors of guidance in other districts, they're like, wow. And I think it's, we made a push, and the directors and the board was receptive to offering to our students to challenge themselves, to get kids who were, on the borderline to challenge themselves in honor classes, or from honors classes to challenge themselves in AP classes. We knew that we might take a little hit in some of the AP courses, but I think that that number of, the colleges, most colleges that are accepting AP results look for a 3 or better. There are some schools that will only take a 4 or a 5. Some of the Ivies may not even take any. But the rigor of the course and the kids challenging themselves, I think, speaks volumes, and hopefully that will continue.
And just to piggyback on that, I forgot to mention when we're doing the AP results, that we look at AP scholars as well. And this past year, 2019, we had a total of 109 AP scholars. Just as an example, in 2018, we had 87. So our AP scholars increased. The nice thing was, we went from, there's AP Scholar, then there's with honors, with distinction, and your national AP Scholar, which is the top ranking. Our scholars went from a 41 in 2018, this is not percentile, these are numbers of students, to a 39, and while we're going, that decreased. When you look with distinction, we went from 26 students receiving an AP Scholar with distinction to 2019, 42. So that was an increase, but what's even better is that our national AP scholars in 2018 went from 3 students being named as national AP scholar, last year 10. So that was a nice jump.
Very strong.
It was a good class, good grade. I wish everybody had the
Questions for the administrators or Dr. Timo on the exams? I did mention before that Matt did, and I'm glad he did. Let's talk to Bob about it. Bob?
I think it's important to put things in perspective, whether it's the assessments, the regents, and certainly the AP. What has been the administrators, as long as I've been on the board, intent is to evaluate the student. As Dee is explaining, the test may be a informational, a factor, and it drives us to go look at the student and see what happened. And that's an important part of this process, is recognizing that the numbers are not the student. The student is what we educate. In this process, 6 years ago, we worked very hard to encourage everyone to participate in AP, not simply to get great grades in it, but to acknowledge the rigor, to avoid the Long Island honors grade inflation, where the AP is a national standard. And what has turned out in these years, to the credit of our administrators, to the credit of our teachers teaching all this, is we encouraged lots of students to participate, even if, as Matt put, on the bubble, and they rose to the challenge. And that's what these scores continuously show, how our students rise to meet that challenge. The rigor of AP later on is not necessarily do you have to take the class or not. You put kids through college, you learn that, yes, you may get some credit, they'll still have to take the course because it's part of their core. That's neither here nor there, it often helps them with college credits. But it's the study skills, it's the knowledge of what is expected of them at a college level course. The classroom discussion is only a part of the test. You need to know what's in the book, you need to know what's in the reading material, and you have to self-study and teach yourself. And that's what AP provides that foundation. And I'm most thankful in this season of everyone's effort in that for our students.
Yeah, that was a pet of Rob too. I know Rob and Matt, the other ministers would actually recruit for AP and go out and find the kids and meet with them, encourage them to take the AP classes. As the director pointed out, we could fix the numbers. We can raise our standards to be admitted to advanced placement classes if we wanted to, put requirements on it, and make sure we take the smartest, and then we're going to have 4s and 5s up there, and we're not going to report on 3 through 5. We can have all 4 and 5s if we fix the admission to AP. But by opening it generally, you give every kid the opportunity to experience the rigor. And as a lot of kids come back and tell our administrators, you know, they'll complain about a tough teacher here. Well, wow, that AP class was hard, that teacher was hard. But when they come back and visit from college, they go, you know, I'm glad I took that teacher's class, it really helped me out. You know, and I benefited from that. There's nothing wrong with some rigor at all. And that's constantly growing. And again, the regional schools are very proud of what our kids do. And I think the AP might have a little influence in some of the areas of the regions. So that is the package. You know, I think overall better than last year, what we reported. And it's great to see the growth. It really is. What do you kids think? What do you think? Good? Are you here in the class project?
AP
You are.
Gov.
AP Gov.
Like send a picture to Ms. Francesi or
Are we allowed to ask them questions?
I thought it was Franchise's class. Question?
Yeah,
Yes,
one
sir.
question. In terms of the AP test, who can be qualified to take the test? Do they have to attend AP classes?
Or?
And also, who is hosting the test?
We give the exam here in May, the week, I think it's May 5th week this year. Any student can challenge an exam. So for example, there were, I believe, we gave 24 exams last year. Only 20 of them were actually courses that we offer that supported the AP exam. So 4 exams, if I'm not mistaken, were students that challenged the exam. A student came in and said, I want to take AP European history. We don't offer that class, but that student has the right. They tell us in advance, we order the exam, and we administer the exam in the high school during that week.
The College Board sends us the exams, and they go back to the College Board for scoring. They're not scored in-house.
And Matt, if you're not remembering the gentleman's name, who was that student valedictorian who was challenged?
Seth Brown.
Seth Brand, how many did he challenge?
I think it was
23?
no.
No.
He
I
took.
think he challenged 5.
Yeah, 23.
23 total.
And challenges.
Yeah, you can challenge 5.
I think he had a national record. 23
He was one of, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, he was one of the top 5 AP exam test takers ever, which we had never heard of.
And we had some computer science students recently who rated second or whatever in the world.
Yes.
Computer science. So, see a lot of good things. We're very fortunate. Any questions from the students?
Do you see a correlation in students taking the ELA exams as elementary school students that correlate to higher grades as high school students? Like if you tracked our data from when we were elementary school kids, us versus people who refuse to take the test?
That's one of the things that unfortunately, Chris, we used to have data that used to do region score projections with the assessments, and after 2012, when the refusal movement started happening, we stopped getting those score projections because less kids were taking the ELA and math tests.
We still get score
So we get score
projections
projections.
for those students
who
that
take
have
those
consistently
exams.
taken the exam.
4 out of 10.
So they'll give us a number and say, this student's projected to get an 85.
And yes, can I look at, and forget about even projections, like how they actually do on the ELA and 11th?
Right, like kids who are refused, do you see lower grades with them because maybe they didn't learn the skills as a younger kid?
It's not a report that we've run, but I look at students
wonder
year
about
by
that.
year, individual student by individual
Chris,
student, so I could come up.
I'll tell you, one year, Mr. Grable and I did something at the middle school years ago. It never counted, the exam. One year we started counting it. In that 1 year, we started counting it as a midterm. The scores went up 17%. Because it counted.
Right.
And that's the big, like you get, all 4 of you know, when you get to the high school, you can't opt out of a Regents exam. And you all turn it up. And you know it counts as 20% of your overall grade. So there's a lot more effort put into to get that score. So I can't even use the ELA scores in the middle school because Mr. Trinitaris did a survey. He timed how long
I
it
timed
took
how
the
long
kids.
kids were on task, because now we're doing computer-based.
Oh, really?
They're ending their test session, they're ending it after like 22 minutes.
Yeah, you can't.
And those are the students that I was saying probably went from a 4 to a 1.
Right.
They're not plentiful. We don't have a lot of those students, but I did look at do students go up or down, and I have a count of every student who either maintained. There are a lot of grade levels where more than half the students maintain, and then maybe we have another, 30% that went up, and then maybe 10% that went down. You're going to look at those students that decreased a little bit.
Chris,
But in terms of looking at to 11th grade, Regents exam, it's a very different type of exam too, but we do have those projection scores as to how a student should do. And 9 times out of 10, our students do better than the projections that we get from overseas exams.
And I'll add one more thing. You guys are in a completely different mindset when you're in high school, and you know that. Everything just becomes a little bit more.
I mean, I think that's probably like the 6th time you used the word correlation today that I heard. So,
It's good work.
nice job.
Chris, interesting you asked that question. I was talking to a director in a district south of here, where the state is now looking over their 5 elementary schools because of the academic levels or the lack of it. And this district is known and famous for opt-out rates. They're in the single digits of participation. Now, because they're saying the state is supervising those 5 elementary schools because their kids are not used to taking high-risk, major stakes exams. And this gentleman said very clearly, they're not test takers.
Right.
They've opted out year after year. I used to meet with parents in my office a couple of years ago opting out, and I just said, my son will take them. I don't want him to panic or get anxious when that Regents exam comes. Like they just pointed out, it doesn't count for these grades. So all the way through elementary, 7th grade, it's okay, don't worry. You don't have to take it, I want you to be anxious. Then suddenly says, if you don't pass that Regents, you don't graduate.
Right.
That's a big difference. Then suddenly you're taking an exam when you have to take a Regents exam. So I think there's something to taking the exam and getting used to a high risk, high pressure, because even when you get out of here, after Regents, after AP, when you get an exam, if you're going to be a lawyer, you're going to take those exams or a test for medical school. You can't opt out of that, for your job and what you want your life to be. So I just think getting prepared and getting used to it, and you don't grow warts, you don't run slower if you take them. And it's a hard thing. My son's in 4th grade, so I took it the first time last year, and he said, Dad, many kids aren't taking it. I said, well, you will, and let me tell you why. I particularly said, I want you to know how to do it, and I want to know where you're strong and weak in math and English. I want to know that, and I want your teacher to know when you go into his class next. That's the only way I put it. But as I wrote to the board, when will this end? I don't think you're going to beat the opt-out rate because anything state people hate and don't want to do it. I think maybe a hiatus in that exam, and then create something different and have community, parent, administrator, teacher input.
And you can't mandate the test within the school, right?
What's that?
Can you mandate like the ELAs within the school, or no? You have to give them the.
No, that was a good thing they polled, but no, you can't mandate that. It's just yes.
So I'm just a community member, but I also teach fourth grade in another district. And I did work for Pearson, writing some of the state tests 2 years ago, sorry to say. But I have to say, people might not know this, so it is kind of helpful. They do give teacher input now to the exams. That's how I was nominated to be on the committee by an administrator in my district. 8 people in the entire state had control over that test in terms of looking at the questions, checking the selections that are given for, I was fourth grade. So it's a tiny group of us, and we have a lot of input. So the test, it's no longer Pearson, but at that time when they were changing over, they really do care about teacher input. They do care about the students. So anybody, I completely agree with you on opting out. My daughter will take the test. It's fine with me. I'm a teacher. You can't opt out of life. You know, they've got to learn how to do this. But they are really looking at making the test more user-friendly for the kids. Your data was excellent, the way it was all laid out and compared. And the test is different. The kids that were taking that are different each year, but the test itself is different. You go from 5 passages to 4 passages, and they throw in a 6th passage. There are 2 days to 1 day, to untimed, to timed.
The reading level is different for the reading passages.
The lexile is different.
Grade appropriate,
Yeah.
all of those factors. This is Questar's last year, though.
I know.
It's their last year of the contract, and I was at a meeting on Friday, and I'm not hearing that it's going to be renewed. So there will probably be another testing company next year.
They were the user-friendly company that I actually worked for. They took over from Pearson, trying to be on the side of the teacher and the student.
Right.
I tell you, they came into the room and said, we care most about the 3rd and 4th grade babies. They called them taking the test. What can we do to make your students happy? And they would type out everything that we said. I did see in last year's assessment that they did listen to what we had to say. They took off some passages that were just really inappropriate, inappropriate in many ways, just lexile inappropriate, questions that could not be answered. They actually have psychometricians that come into the room. When you want to take out a question, you have to have a question put in that's equal level. So a lot goes into it, and I think if people knew that, they would probably maybe not refuse it as much as they had in the past. So if maybe people start to know that there is some teacher input, and maybe people feel a little bit better about taking it. So
They tried a lot of things, but again, for comparison's sake, in grades 3 to 8, when the test changes every year, you know, and kids change every year taking, you can't, it's not valid. And the state themselves tells you, don't compare the tests.
no, but they want you to do that and see the growth, which is hard.
Yeah, and I think what was unfortunate was they changed the testing format, and they made it 3 through 8 at the same time they brought on Common Core.
That's a whole other issue.
And there was a whole struggle with Common Core, and somehow those two got put together, which never should have
Well,
happened.
now we have the next gen standard, so that's going to change again. So
I think if
it's
they
never
kept it, you know, back when it was 4th and 8th grade, you took the ELA, the math, and the science.
very appropriate test.
And then when Common Core came in and they created all the different assessments, it created that.
So thank you for your data. I thought it was excellently presented. So thank you.
And if you guys need anything.
Questions?
I'm in the high
Administrators
school
are gonna
for
excuse me.
6:13.
I'm going to say
Stop by.
something first. This is the time of year with Thanksgiving coming that I want to take a moment with some of the administrators here. Some are not. It is an opportune time for me, for the board, or for thanks for what occurred over this past 6 months since July. Every time I asked you to do something, it was either done or was going to be done. You had my confidence from the beginning. I cannot thank you enough for my children. They're all my children. And it reminds me of a difficult time. And you stood up and you took care of them all. Some of you are not here, but I thank you greatly. And I thank you on behalf of our children. This was a very special year and a very difficult year. And I will never forget what all of you did. On behalf of the board, thank you.
Any more questions about tests? You guys need anything to report on that? Good questions, Chris. Good job. Okay, would the board like to return to the agenda, please? Gentlemen and ladies, administrators, thank you very much for being here.
I'm in 6th grade.
minutes. Anne Marie?
Approval of minutes. Resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent, the Board of Education hereby accepts the minutes of the October 16th, 2019 regular meeting as submitted.
May I have a second?
I'll second that.
Comments? All in favor? Anyone have any questions on the agenda? Personnel 5. Lisa?
Instructional appointment, substitute teacher, resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent. The Board of Education hereby approves the following substitute teachers. Brandon Loomis, October 22nd, start date, substitute teacher compensation, $111 a day.
May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Pete. All in favor? Ed, you want to continue on with B?
Non-instructional appointments. School district aides, resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent, the Board of Education hereby approves the following appointments as listed.
Thank you. Any comments? All in favor? Continue on with number 2, Ed.
Substitute custodian, resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent, the Board of Education hereby approves the following appointment for Joseph Mulvaney, start date November 21st, 2019, as a substitute custodian at a rate of $14 per hour.
May I have a second?
Second.
Oh, they're racing. Any comments? All in favor? Steve, C.
Coaches, resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent, the Board of Education hereby approves the following coaching appointments for the 2019-20 school year as listed.
May I have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you. Any comments? All in favor? Continue on with 2.
Sure. District President Liaison, resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent, the Board of Education hereby appoints Abel Fernandez as District Resident Liaison for the 2019-20 school year, a yearly stipend of $1,000.
May I have a second?
Second.
Any comments? All in favor? And 3, if you'll wrap that up.
Club Advisor, resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent, the Board of Education hereby approves the following middle school club advisor for after-school detention as needed to Elena Graham as they back up to Nicole tomorrow.
May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. I'm not really sure in the comments that that's really a club. All in favor? I don't want to do that. Rob, action items, please.
Action items, educational, Committee on Special Education. Resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent, the Board of Education has no objections to the following special education recommendation and approves the authorization for the funds to implement the special education programs and services consistent with such as listed.
Thank you, Steve. Comments? Just for our students, the reason there's nothing really listed there is it's all privileged. So we just have the date of the meeting and we approve or disapprove based on that. All in favor? And back to Pete.
Action items, business, obsolete equipment, resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent, the Board of Education hereby declares the following items as obsolete and further authorizes disposal as listed.
May I have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Ed. I do like the fact that we're getting rid of the chopping boards. Not really sure what they're used for. That's part of the classroom detention. Hopefully, probably family, so to say. Any other comments?
Robert, I just want to know, but Brad, you interested in going through the dumpster for any items or?
They get separated out into metal, non-metal.
Yes, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Gotta make sure you get the glass.
All in favor?
Yeah.
Thank you. 2.
I had to, that's fine.
How about the file cabinets, decent shape, might take them home.
Anne Marie, board committees.
Resolved, the Board of Education hereby establishes the following advisory board committees for the 2019-20 school year. Strategic Curriculum Program Committee, Robert Sweeney, Chairperson, Lisa Pfeffer, Edward Long. Wellness and Health and Safety Committee, Robert Sweeney, Chairperson, Anne Marie Henninger, Pete Newman.
May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Rob. All in favor? Any other questions? Yes, sir. How are you, Brad?
Good, how are you?
Very well, thank you.
I'm curious about Mr. Loomis's reappointment. He was, just mainly because he was my daughter's most favorite teacher.
Well, he thought he did a job with, I think, Hawaii Five-O was police in Hawaii.
Yes.
And he was worried how his fiance felt about being away from our loved ones and home here. And so he turned away the position that he had received in return to us. And it would have been great if he stayed, because now he's a substitute rather than a staff member, but he had to give that a shot.
Okay, good. Glad to have him back.
It is good to have him.
Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
You come down to the microphone? Yes.
If you don't mind,
Oh,
we
that's
can't
fine.
hear on the, particularly behind, we can't hear on the table.
It's loud.
Brad's loud.
So I can ask back in September some security questions, and I'd like to say thank you, because the booth actually has someone in it, and they check your ID, and they ask you questions, which is excellent. All I use to green check when you walk in the elementary building, so that's a great improvement. So thank you for that. And this can't be helped this year, but can we look at that size for next year? My daughter's first grade class has over the contract number. It's large. There's 25, 26 kids in every first grade class. I don't know what happened in kindergarten, it was 20. No, these are kids came from, or somewhere, it's a lot of kids just moved in. That's a ton of kids, classroom is tiny. And I can tell there's a difference in terms of what she's getting instructionally. There's just, it's more distraction. And the teacher didn't know it's a large class. So if we could look at that in the future, because I know it can't be helped this year, it's over the contract, which I think is probably a problem with the teachers as well.
Thank you. Any other questions tonight? I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Pete. All in favor? Happy Thanksgiving.